Good afternoon. Welcome to Data and AI Live. Thank you very much for joining us wherever you are in the world. Our guest today is Tim Kiely, who's head of Data and AI at unique and revolutionary mid-market focused PE firm Baypine. And we're going to be talking about why data and AI is set to transform the mid-market. Before I bring Tim in and introduce him, just a couple of bits of housekeeping. We are live, so if anything goes wrong, bear with us. Has gone wrong before. We've had fire alarms and cleaners walk in and yet to have a stream go down. But if anything like that happens, just bear with us and we'll get back on track. Secondly, Tim and I are going to talk on this topic for probably about 30 minutes, give or take. And then we're going to have a Q&A session for 10 minutes or so at the end of that. So feel free to, and it's actively encouraged for you to ask questions by putting those in the comments down below on LinkedIn. Most of those questions will then come to at the end, but if there's a question that you ask that's particularly relevant to the topic we're talking about at that time, we may bring it up and take it then. But either way, if you've got questions, just put them in the comments down below as soon as they come into your head, rather than waiting at the end. So thanks again for joining us. Let me introduce Tim. Afternoon, Tim. How are you?
Hey, Jeremy, coming from New York. Thanks for the conversation.
Yeah, pleasure. Really looking forward to it. I don't know, Tim, as a good place to start, do you want to give, I know I gave a sort of very brief introduction of Baypine, but do you want to give maybe a slightly longer introduction of Baypine and yourself to set the scene?
Sure, yeah. Baypine is a new kind of private equity firm founded a few years back by some of the biggest names in technology and private equity that are out there. And the promise of Baypine to investors and then the portfolio company subsequently was around digital transformation. So the thesis was the vast majority of the middle market in the US is not tech enabled, even though tech tends to soak up a lot of the attention. And our founders foresaw a rapid value creation wave taking place over the next couple of decades. And of course, this was before the AI boom, really, of a couple of years ago. And decided to form a private equity firm specifically on the premise of transforming what they might call core economy or older companies and taking them through that technological transformation and unlocking all of that value. Now, of course, when the AI boom took off a couple of years ago, Baypine, in some sense, was tailor-made to take advantage of that opportunity. And so rather than having to change strategies or tack on or sort of be adjacent to AI's value creation lever, it fits right into our strategy and it fits right into our alignment as our leadership group aligns with our portfolio company leadership and ultimately returning value back to our investors. So it's been a really exciting moment to be at a place like Baypine as all the attention on AI has been driving all of these outsized gains more recently.
Yeah, fantastic. And just for our audience as well, I'm sure some people watching will know you, but just for those that don't, how did you get here and how did you get to Baypine? What's your background?
Sure. Yeah. So trained as a statistician and a data scientist, I have been working in private equity for something like close to a decade at this point, mostly in an operational role, working closely with portfolio companies, driving digital change, and particularly around using data and AI to make better decisions and have those better decisions translate into bottom line impact. And even though it sounds simple when you put it in one sentence like that, I can assure you it's quite a bit more difficult than it sounds from the outside. Generally speaking, what this job is driving change. The technology is fun and it's why I got into it. But the technology part's actually in terms of the percent of the effort, identifying and understanding the technology is a rather small percent of the effort compared to convincing people that the technology is worthwhile adopting and then changing how their company runs or how they themselves behave in order to realize that benefit. So it's as much a change management job as it is anything else. I've been doing it for, again, close to a decade at this point, before I joined Baypine about a year ago.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get into it then, Tim, because time will run short, as it always does with these things. But so why, or let me put it this way, what makes the mid-market particularly ripe for transformation through data and AI now?
Sure. I mean, first of all, just to set the stage, the middle market, depending on how you define it, is about a third of US GDP and about a third of the jobs in the country. So it's a massive group of companies and group of individuals and group of value. Those companies, the way I'd characterize them versus, say, the upper market, almost all private, privately owned. Generally speaking, many of them founder run, and usually have gotten very good at some very specific customer service, and have what I would call probably chronically underdeveloped corporate functions. Right, that seems to be the case across most of these functions. They just don't have the resources to put into marketing or HR or IT that many of the public companies have the funding and ability to do. So they're at a little bit of a funding disadvantage. Where they have an advantage versus some of the larger companies is being privately held, and that's primarily what we focus on, are the private portions of the middle market. They have the ability to think a little bit more medium to long term compared to the public. In addition to that, so they can make those medium to long term investments without having to worry about hitting quarterly goals. So that puts them in a good place to make some of these investments, but it doesn't solve the funding challenge until a technology like AI comes along, which does a number of things. First and foremost, just deploying generative AI into your organization costs almost nothing. And I'm going to say almost nothing because in terms of an IT budget of a typical firm that we're talking about, $10,000 to $20,000 is not that much for the kind of value that you get back. In addition to that, AI has rapidly decreased the price of developing custom software that you might use to take advantage of AI technology itself. So there's a few different factors going on, but mostly AI sort of reaching this, what we saw with cloud and what we saw with the internet, even, and what we saw with computing. It's reached this cost point, which allows companies to adopt it quickly without multi-year implementations. And the firms that can think in that sort of 3 to 5 year investment timeframe are going to be the ones that can really transform and take the most advantage of this kind of technology, I think.
Yeah. So is it kind of, what I'm hearing, it's fair to say that there are structural advantages in a privately held mid-market company that perhaps an enterprise level business doesn't have, and combine that with the fact that I guess the cost accessibility, let's say, of generative AI, it's kind of a perfect storm. Is that
Absolutely.
fair?
I mean, when CRMs were rolling out, not to pick on any specific CRM, but the typical rollout was several $1 million and supposed to be 12 months. That could often drift into more than 12 months. And public companies could weather that kind of cost. Private companies didn't really have the ability, by and large, to pursue that kind of implementation at the scale that you really need in order to get it up and running and get value out of it. When the technology drops to something that you can stand up in a week and spend a couple of $1,000s on, that really opens the door for really anybody to get on board. But then what I mentioned before, these privately held companies and these smaller companies, they have the ability to think, okay, we've woven AI through our organization. Now we have an idea about what are the 3 to 5 things that we really need to do that are going to strategically differentiate ourselves from our competitors. Maybe that's much better, much more customized customer service, or lower unit costs in scheduling, or software development. They can create those programs much more fluidly and with much more agility than larger companies can. So it's this dual. the cost of getting started has fallen, but the cost of getting really good at it favors these middle market companies that can make those 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. And it kind of feels like, as you say, I mean, mid-market is circa sort of 1/3 of the US economy. It kind of feels like this is a massive, without resorting to hyperbole, it feels like, given those two things, this is now a massive opportunity for companies in that segment.
Massive opportunity, and in some very specific places, existential question. So if your business primarily creates content, like you're an education business or you're a marketing business, this technology is existential for your company. Huge opportunity, but absolutely something that it has really evolved from a worry of the CTO to a board level imperative that the company form a strategy around this technology in certain sectors.
Yeah. And in 10 minutes or so, or quarter of an hour towards the end, Tim and I are going to talk about practical steps for operators if perhaps you feel like you're maybe behind the 8 ball on this. So stay tuned for that. But I don't know if before that, Tim, you want to tell us about how you've been approaching this at Baypine, and some of the sort of, I guess, practical steps you've taken with your own portfolio companies.
Sure. Yeah, and I can probably even more importantly get into a lot of the pitfalls that we've seen, right? Which is typical of hype cycle happens, executives get interested, top-down directives start coming, and then in many places I've seen us hit sort of that trough of disillusionment where they're thinking, hey, AI is supposed to be making all of these gains for me. Where is it? Where's the ROI? Where's the return on investment? So having done this for a few years now, I can definitely start to speak to where are some of the pitfalls. But at Baypine, there's no one way to approach this for every company, but in general, this is a good arc to follow. The right way to think about how to get value out of AI is the following. The first and most important thing is disseminate the technology throughout your organization. So bring down the barriers for people to be able to use this technology, and that can be as simple as getting a ChatGPT Enterprise or a Claude Enterprise license in the hands of some or all of your employees. Encourage them to use it, encourage them to share those use cases, and really track that adoption and have people sharing across silos what are the best ways to be using this technology. From there, and it's important that you do that first, so it's educate, build that muscle. This is a new muscle. Talking to a computer is a new muscle. We need to learn how to do that. From there, the next step is what I'll call align and prioritize. I think it works really well when you let the best organic use cases bubble up from your people, because everyone's going to use it a little bit differently. So the person working on picking boxes on the loading dock, they're gonna have one way to use it. HR is going to have another way to use it. Legal is going to have a way to use it. They're all going to have interesting ways to increase their own productivity and create value. So you're going to find very quickly dozens and dozens, probably more than you can handle, use cases, ways that you could potentially add value. A few of those are really going to stand out. Oh, we should be generating educational content with this technology. How do we specifically do that? Let's pilot it. Let's find out. So first, roll out and educate and adopt. Second, align and prioritize. Let those use cases emerge organically. And third, align and execute. Right? So once you've let those ideas percolate, then you pick the transformational ones. You put it right at the top of the company's strategic priorities. In some cases, companies are fine just sticking with steps 1 and 2. But in some cases, the third thing you want to do is find those transformational use cases, pilot them, and then align resources around them and execute them right from the C-suite level. So it's really a process of infuse this throughout your organization. By the way, you're going to get 20% productivity gains for most people when you do that, particularly knowledge type workers. Let them bring you that list of use cases, find the transformational ones, align and execute against them.
What I find interesting about this is that in some ways, this kind of system or method that you've just articulated is counterintuitive to the typical kind of narrative you hear around data transformation or data and AI transformation. And I wonder if that's because of actually the cost accessibility of this. It allows this to happen. But in years gone by, you'd have had that approach kind of poo-pooed, let's say, because it potentially there's serious cost implications there if you just let those ideas percolate. But I'm excited by the sounds of this, because you're almost saying, well, get this stuff into the hands of users, let them play around and let the ideas come up organically. And is that because of one, that I understand why that would be helpful, but is the lack of cost implications now allowing companies to do that, whereas perhaps in years gone by they wouldn't have been able to from a cost perspective?
Absolutely. The cost perspective is one. It's again, I don't want to speak for every company, but it's a relatively low cost to execute a plan like this, at least the first couple of stages. And really, I go back to this technology is fundamentally different than anything we've interacted with before. The best analogies that I've heard are, this is like a whole new kind of computing. It's like the computer was invented all over again, and we all have to learn how to use computers again. Electricity is another one. What's the imagine the board member or the CEO coming to, how should I be using electricity? Well, there isn't really one way to use electricity. There's a lot of ways to use electricity. There's probably some really impactful ones, but let's work through that. So one is, yes, the cost to get it into people's hands. That's important. Two is, this is a new muscle. So, this is not Google. Don't use it like Google. That's, again, going back to pitfalls. That's where this goes off the rails a lot of times, is people just don't take the time to learn how to use this technology and understand that. What is it? What is conversational intelligence? What is that? How does that work? Where are the boundaries? What is it good at? How do you watch out for errors? How do you watch out for hallucinations? You need to really get comfortable with that before you go to step 3, which is, we need to make a content generation engine for this technology. I think if you skip right to 3, I mean, you might get lucky, but most likely you're going to miss a lot of important details about where the edges and the boundaries of this technology are and how to execute them. So
Yeah,
that is absolutely what we coach our executives on.
Most people might be sort of scared by that, because most transformation people will be used to sort of, well, look, we need to tell our users to use this new technology and make sure they do. Whereas kind of what you're saying is, no, put it in their hands, help them enjoy it. So what's the process you go through to help them use it, help them enjoy it, and get that kind of adoption, and therefore get those ideas percolating at a practical level?
Yeah, at a practical level, and this is as true within Baypine as it is at our portfolio companies. Some of our portfolio companies are very self-organizing around this. You give them the tool and they just run with it because that's their culture, I suppose. In other places, I'll say the practical tool that has worked the best, I think, is having individual users share their use cases. So there's, early on in this journey, one of the things I tried was, hey, here's 3 use cases for an LLM that you can try. And I just kind of got up in front of people and said, hey, try it this way. Negotiation coach, go try it. Very limited success with that, because I wasn't ever really picking the specific use case that could hit every single person in that audience. Maybe 2 people out of 100 said, oh yeah, I could use it that way. But the rest of them are like, I would never do that. Why? That doesn't make any sense to me. So the best thing that I've found is get a large number of users to get up in front of their peers and start sharing their 30-second use cases. I'll use it this way. We had one of our admins stand up and say, oh, I put a PDF with calendar dates on it into ChatGPT, and then I downloaded .ics files and then automatically added that to my Outlook. Everyone was like, wow, didn't even know you could do that. What an awesome use case. Small productivity saving. But what happens there is, first, you get a higher volume of use cases. Second, you get an appreciation for the variety of things that this technology can do. And it's intelligence, right? Like what can you do with intelligence? All kinds of things. And third, is there's this social pressure aspect where everyone in that audience is kind of seeing, oh, other people are doing this, I should do this too. So of all the sort of change management tools out there, that's the one that I found to be most effective for promoting adoption.
And would you get users just to do that in like a town square type meeting, or their own department meeting at that kind of level?
Yeah, just encouraging them, hey, at your group meeting or at the town hall or at the company meetup, get 3, 5, 10 people up and just have them do a 30-second demo.
Yeah. And at the risk of sounding stupid, taking it on a level, once you've let those ideas percolated, done a few pilots, how do you then move from, well, what are the pilots that we should then really execute on?
Yeah, absolutely. That is where a little bit more top-down involvement can come back in handy. So once you've given your people ample time and tools to create some of these ideas, then it's a series, at least the way that we approach it, series of workshops, series of communications around, you guys come tell us what are the best ways to use this technology. Here's some ideas to get started. Start rank ordering this, right? That's the align and prioritize step. Often what will happen in there is some sort of business case. Okay, if we were able to do this, okay, we can cut $8 million of cost out of this particular side. Let's go pilot this. Wow, we were able to cut 50% of the time out of that particular process. That's incredible. Let's take that, build a business case, and then go to our leadership and say, this is essential to our company. This is going to cost X number of dollars, and you can expect ROI of Y over 3 or something like that. So it just gets back to the standard business case. But the real key is get a really good sense of what those use cases are, those big use cases. And again, it's cheap to try these things out. So you can run 2, 4, 6-week pilots with a ChatGPT instance and a couple of people and see, if we're really working at this, can we do it faster? Can we do it higher quality? Can we personalize the message a little bit more? Those are all things that you want to look at.
Yeah. And during the last 12 months at Baypine, any specific portfolio companies or use cases that either you're particularly proud of or have created great value that are worth identifying or worth talking about?
So anything in and around customer service has been a big focus of ours up front, and a lot of our portfolio companies don't even need our nudging to look at this. So they're testing tools that the simple one is chatbots for customer interactions and customer complaints. So you can see deflection rates from certain chatbots of 60, 70, I've seen 80% deflection rates, where most people's question is, hey, my order didn't arrive. Chatbot just sort of comes back and says, yeah, your order's en route, and then that saves you a phone call, right? So a lot of customer service. One of the areas that we've been seeing a lot of success in, that I was actually rather surprised because I wasn't confident that the technology was mature enough for this, but it seems like it is. We've had some very successful pilots at certain portfolio companies with AI voice-based agents doing cold and semi-cold calls to potential customers to try to reactivate customers or reel in customers. And for a fraction of the cost of a typical call center, you can actually get a relatively decent ROI if you set a program like that up right. So very, very excited about that. We're looking at that across a number of portfolio companies, particularly where scheduling is a big deal. We have one company called Qualderm. They run dermatology clinics. You can imagine, scheduling is one of the highest volume activities that they do. They're constantly trying to fit people into a puzzle piece that is who shows up at the clinic at any given day. So the voice activated agents, customer service in general. Another area that we've seen some really interesting progress on, again, a little bit more cutting edge and earlier on, is in just data and analytics and sort of decision intelligence, right? So there's this very promising set of technologies which allow you, and we'll call it chat with your data, allow you to interact with databases, I'll say, directly. So ask questions of your Snowflake instance or ask questions of your SharePoint drive. I think leaders get very excited about this one. I think a lot of people get very excited about this one. In the past, BI was supposed to kind of solve this a little bit, but in the past, leader has a question, they have to go to their analytics team or maybe their FP&A team, and they say, hey, got this question, please go answer it. Team goes off, maybe they come back in, could be a day, could be 2 days, could be a few weeks, could be longer than that. And maybe they didn't quite understand the question that well, so they present you something, you say, well, that's not, or maybe you didn't even know to ask the specific question that you really wanted to ask. So they come back and you go, well, now that I'm looking at it, actually what I meant was, and then they go back and they iterate that way. Chat with your data takes that out, right? It just sort of, it allows smart people who just don't happen to know SQL, right? Because a lot of people just didn't take the time to learn SQL. Um, it allows them to just ask those questions and get answers. So we at one of our companies, Hollywood, which sells outdoor furniture, we've got some great folks uh, on the marketing team there and some great technologists. But one in particular really stuck out to me, which was the head of marketing there. They recently stood up sort of a Databricks instance, which has this new product called Genie, which is exactly what we're talking about here, to sort of chat with your data. And it's not magical. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into it, but this head of marketing is sort of the perfect poster child for this, because here's a very smart, very capable individual who just happens to not know how to query using SQL or Python, and can sit
Yeah.
with Databricks and just ask questions like, what was my ROAS by state for the last 12 months, and get the answer immediately, and then ask a follow-up question, and then turn that into insights, which they then go execute against. So not only is that valuable, but the thing that he said was, I'm having so much fun doing this for the first time in a long time. And I just thought that was an amazing thing to hear. It's delightful and it creates value. It's just kind of that perfect nexus of a new technology that has just an amazing amount of promise across a lot of different applications.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up, 'cause it's kind of funny. It's like Gen AI has finally realised the potential of BI, isn't it? 15, 20 years down the line, the potential of BI that we all sort of imagined when that first
And
came out.
just more in general, if we're doing sort of our trend spotting and forecasting a bit, I mean, you can kind of see where this is going, which is these chat agents, and increasingly we're interacting them with voice as well, but we'll call them chat agents. They're already getting so smart, right? They are very, very smart. The
100%.
thing they can't do yet is really take actions or get context unless you explicitly give it to them. Um, you see the action piece getting solved through things like MCP. And so, as a simple example, a lot of the data vendors that I'm talking to, like SourceScrub and PitchBook, they're building these what they call MCP servers, sort of a standard way for LLMs to talk to specific applications and specifically data in this case. Net result being, from your ChatGPT instance, you can ask questions that can be answered by CapIQ data or S&P data or D&B data, Dave and Buster data, or PitchBook or SourceScrub. And you can imagine a lot of vendors are just going to start building and shipping these connectors so that in your chosen chat interface, whatever it happens to be, you don't have to leave that chat interface to get answers and build insights from a variety of sources. You can already sort of do it with web search. But in general, this idea of kind of connecting data and connecting context to increasingly connecting data and context to these chat interfaces, and again, voice is a big part of that. You could just see that trend continuing on forever, right? Like they become the one place you go to ask a question about, um, financial market performance, or how do my portfolio companies do, or who should I talk to today, or what are my contacts that I haven't spoken to in a while. Um, you could just start to see as you automate these connections, and this sort of chat with your data paradigm is a piece of that. Um, I just get very excited about the the way that you could see that evolving over time, and the productivity that you're going to see coming from that.
Yeah, I agree, and I think actually this chat with your data topic's a great segue into the next topic we're going to cover, which is around data accessibility, because I think you're right. A lot of smart senior executives will be very excited by the potential of, as you've as you've talked about a chat with your data, but probably then their next question is going to be, well, is our data good enough for us to start down that route or build that within our organization? So talk to me about data accessibility organizations, then its implications, and answering those questions that organizations might have about that side of things.
This is where I'm going to start to sound like a broken record, because data cleanliness and hygiene has been a topic that I've been pushing and evangelizing for close to a decade.
This is going to be the unsexy part of the show now for everyone. We're going to talk about data quality, so tune out now if you.
I do think there might be this temptation to think that AI has nothing to do with your data, and that's so wrong, because AI will be as good as the context that you give it, and the context will very quickly just become the data that you have. So you're going to want to create insights around what your company is specifically doing. It becomes sort of BI and a place you can take action all at the same time. So yeah, clean up your data, folks. Clean up your data. Having 97 versions of the same Excel file, each named the same with just V97 at the end of it, then that becomes a problem pretty quickly. You need your data to be labeled, good metadata. You need sources of truth to be clearly identified. There are things like data catalogs that can help with these sorts of things, but it's an investment that's worthwhile. Jeremy, I don't think this is controversial, but maybe I just stay in my own bubble too long. I think kind of Google and Facebook show the flywheel effects of good, clean data, and I just think that AI just accelerates that to a whole other level.
If you're an operator then at a mid-market firm or a PE operating partner mid-market firm, and you've just heard that and you're thinking, okay, well, how do we get there? What do you need, like from a data infrastructure perspective, from a talent infrastructure, from a talent perspective? What are the things you should be thinking about in those two instances to get to a point where your data is accessible enough to build these AI applications?
I think the easiest way to generally answer that question is to make it a priority, right? So it can't be on the side of the desk of the CTO, which too often we commonly find in the middle market. Data engineering is a discipline that all organizations should have at this point, or should invest in. Heads of data are becoming much more popular. I've seen chief data officers. That's been a phenomenon mostly in tech, but I've seen that filtering into the middle market more and more. There's no one size fit all solution, but suffice it to say that it's as important a function as sales or marketing or FP&A. So invest in it commensurately.
Speaking of chief data officers, so I was asked to ask you a question prior to this. So someone reached out to me anonymously to ask you a question, and the question was, we're $100 million revenue business. Do we need a chief data officer, or is that overkill?
Cannot answer that question from a revenue figure alone. Especially these days, you could be $100 million firm with 10 people in some cases. So it's a little hard to say with that amount of context. Let's say just in general, broad strokes.
They're a kind of a mid-market services type business. I would describe them as non-tech, I guess would be the best way.
Start with the customer value and the transformational use cases. If you're a services firm, and maybe that means electrical services, and you're sort of residentially focused, and you've got thousands of interactions a day. The idea that you could use the data that you have or could collect to give you a competitive advantage that your immediate competitors cannot have, because you have more touch points, by personalizing the customer experience through marketing, through sales, through customer experience. If you could see your way to that kind of use case, then absolutely you need a chief data officer. If you feel like you can handle that with your current setup, then you're fine. It's not as easy as, we are this business, we have this revenue, do we need a chief data officer? If you can see your path to a differentiating use case that is going to grab market share or reduce your unit costs or just boost revenue in some way, then absolutely invest in that. It's not something that's going to happen on its own.
Yeah.
Good question.
Yeah, well, we started the Q&A a little bit early, but I'm going to cover one more topic very quickly with Tim shortly. We've run over as ever with these things, but then we're going to go, so probably in a couple of minutes, we're going to go into Q&A. So anyone that's watching, listening, has got questions, please get them down in the comments now, because we've probably got about 10 minutes left on the stream. So get them in the comments now, or forever hold your peace. Final thing for you, Tim, before we go into that, is kind of and maybe we've covered this a little bit in the last 5 minutes, but practical steps. If you're an operator at a firm, like what, listening to this and thinking, yeah, we need to take action, what would you advise people do straight away, tomorrow or Monday morning? What are those initial first steps that folks should take?
We did cover this to a certain extent, but the first thing to do is, let's say you're an operator, you have a portfolio of a handful of companies. Go inventory your portfolio. How many have a ChatGPT enterprise license? How many licenses do they have deployed? If the number is 0, then should they be deploying more? Should they be learning this muscle? Inventory your portfolio companies. Go out and do that. Just see where you're at. Look for the ones that are further ahead and further behind. Start to disseminate those use cases across the portfolio as well as within the portfolio. But probably the easiest thing is if your GP doesn't have, if your private equity firm doesn't have one of these chat tools, you need to get one of those. Your portfolio companies need those, and then from there you need to know where your portfolio companies are in terms of how many people are on these chat tools and are they organizing themselves around transformational initiatives.
Yeah, great advice. Let's finish with some questions then, Tim. Thanks for all these insights, by the way. So Chris Stanley's asked a question. Have you seen work in accelerating engineering teams with code gen and applying that to higher leverage development teams?
Yeah, and I realize we skipped over kind of the standard framework for how portfolio companies are finding value in general. I think I wanted to focus a little bit more on sort of the ones that grow revenue, but I see Chris did a follow up on PE firms specifically, but it's software development, it's customer service, it's call centers, it's content generation, right? Those are sort of the big ones. There's several more that you could get into, more minor categories, and then those will break down into individual categories underneath. But those are the big ones. Software development. So yes, absolutely. I don't think you have to encourage software developers to try the new tool all that much. You could maybe make it easier for them in terms of things like compliance or expensing the tools that they're using. But software developers typically really like trying the new framework, really like trying the new tool. So in a lot of places, and this applies to data engineers as well, I think the problem that I've seen, if they're not adopting it, then yes, you could encourage them. The problem I've seen is, I wouldn't even call it a problem. These tools, the state-of-the-art software engineering tool changes or has changed every 4 to 6 months for quite some time. It was Copilot and Cursor and Claude Code, and GPT-5 is supposed to come out tomorrow, so we'll see where we land after that. So one thing that's difficult is now Gemini is the best on the benchmarks, and before we were on ChatGPT, and to say nothing of Claude, which everybody's getting obsessed with. So there's almost too much going on, and so focusing it down for them might be a little bit helpful there. In terms of actually driving value, like I have seen our software teams be delighted by these tools. They've started shipping features from these tools. So one of our, they just love showing how, the new page where the customer goes to click and show, hey, I had a problem with my order. That whole page now for one of our portfolio companies, that was built with Cursor in like a couple of days. So they love that. In terms of how that's translating to value, it might be harder to link that out of the gate. But it's very hard to say, sort of with more rapid iteration and software teams that are more self-sufficient and they have to outsource less. How valuable is that? It's a little hard to draw that line, but it's undoubtedly valuable. And if you believe in it, then you should absolutely organize it.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, Chris had a follow-up question, which is, I guess, more specific around PE firms. How about for PE firms? How are you leveraging AI in your prospecting, deal analysis, and execution process?
Absolutely something we're keeping an eye on. I would say that PE firms in general, there have been a lot of prospective tools that have been presented to PE firms. One of the things that we do is we interrogate the data of a particular private company, and we have a very short amount of time to do that, and we have to do it, as thoroughly as writing several $100 million checks requires you to do. So if you could do that faster or better, I mean, it's an undoubted valuable thing for a private equity firm. So there's a lot of tools that are coming out that are trying to help with that process. We've tested a bunch. One thing I could say is, get with your compliance teams and just tell them that the volume of tools that you might need to test might be going up soon. So that's one thing to think about. Have we found sort of like the tools that I think we're going to be using long term? I'm not sure we found those yet. I think, we at Baypine, we've got our ChatGPT Enterprise instance. Other people are using a variety of other tools. The note takers, we're kind of making it easy for people to try different ones and see what they like. Our CRM is launching a variety of AI features. So all that's great stuff. I would say, we're still very much in the testing phase there. And in terms of, kind of our own framework for our portfolio companies, are we into those transformational use cases yet? We're thinking about it more in terms of how our portfolio companies will use it, but we're thinking about it how we're going to use it as well. So could we double our productivity? It's a question. We're going to try to figure out how to do that. Could we cut the amount of time it takes to bring a company to our investment committee? Can we cut that in half? We're thinking about that. So we're definitely in the testing phase there. I don't think there are any real clear winners yet. And the clear winner might be ChatGPT Enterprise, right? Or one of the chatbots. Like, I think, again, going back to these connectors and protocols that are allowing you to interact directly with data sources, that very well to me might be sort of the winning formula there, but we'll see.
Yeah, you've been testing a lot, as you said. You said you tested a bunch. What advice might you give to people around evaluating AI tools and vendors, and sort of how to separate hype from substance?
It's a really interesting phenomenon where a lot of these tools, these AI infused tools, they put on amazing demos. You can make a great demo in an afternoon. What was Sam Altman tweeted yesterday or today? Software is entering its fast fashion era, where the cost and ability to write software and to create interesting looking tools is falling dramatically. And so it's like much higher volume software, much more customized. And out of that, you get really, really impressive looking things, which, just in sort of my personal experience and the experience of a lot of colleagues that I have and contacts in this industry that do this job, a lot of them fall over when you try to stand them up. They're a little brittle. They don't work quite right. They take a little bit too much effort to maintain. So demo well, don't really stand up seems to be a pretty clear pattern. How you evaluate, I would say the most efficient way to evaluate a lot of these tools is by setting up a testing framework. So, for example, if you have a tool that claims to be able to read a data room or like a folder of data and then answer questions about that, come up with 25 questions and write out the answers yourself, and then test that tool on your 25 questions, have your ground truth, and just be setting up those unit tests constantly. So it's a concept that is very, very popular in software engineering. I think now needs to be applied to a broader set of applications that we're testing.
Great, thanks, Tim. And Chris Stanley, thank you for your questions. Question here from Emil. I'd imagine the answer to this is going to be context specific, but what role does Baypine play in prototyping a particular data solution? How hands-on are you in the implementation process?
So a lot of times I have to keep myself from being too hands-on. I really enjoy that kind of work, like data engineering type work, standing up a Snowflake or a Databricks instance, architecting that medallion structure. Those are things that I really like to do. The company has to own it. So I have to take a step back and make sure that they are doing the work. And if I'm doing work for them, they need to understand what I'm doing really, really carefully. So what I find is I'm very helpful at sort of the business case stage. So, okay, what's our data stack going to be? Fivetran, Airbyte, Snowflake, Databricks, which BI tool should we pick? Good at that stage. ROI case, architecture stage. So, our gold layer is going to be this data mart with these specific views. We're going to work backwards from that. Marketing is going to be here. So good at the architecture stage. And then when it gets into the technical development stage, I love to roll up my sleeves and pitch in as much as possible. Generally speaking, I try to play more of a coach in that area. And like with software engineering, data engineering, which is just sort of writing SQL queries to set up specific tables and sort of architecting your database and your data, is experiencing the same kind of increase in productivity that software engineering is. So with with Cursor and Python, you can write a DBT pipeline in 2 hours, which used to take 8 weeks or something like that. So yeah, there's a lot to do there. I try to be more of a coach than sort of like a hands-on, but it's going to be, as Jeremy, you said, that's going to be very context dependent.
Yeah, great. Emil, thank you for your question. Appreciate it. We are out of time, I'm afraid. Felt like we could have carried on a lot longer, Tim, but these things always go much quicker than expected. So look, thanks everyone for tuning in. I hope this has been valuable. Tim, thanks so much. Huge insight here, I think. Really appreciate your time, and yeah, hopefully see you again soon.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy.
Take care. Cheers, everyone.